So, I had this dream last night.
Yeah, what about?
I was a superhero lawyer called the Deal Closer.
Oh my.
Yeah, and my superpower was closing deals and giving clients high-value services in short time.
Well, maybe you've been influenced by Deal Closer, the pod's new sponsor.
Oh, right.
I mean, it makes sense. Deal Closer does have a superpower vibe. It helps lawyers close deals, bill, and collect faster.
It's all coming back to me now. They offer document management, collaboration, e-signing, and really easy comparisons between versions.
That's right. But to be clear, I do support your superhero aspirations. I mean, you're close already. And maybe while you get there, you can use Deal Closer.
It's time I work with one of the fastest growing transaction management companies in North America.
And if you visit cloud.dealcloser.com/lawyerlife, you can get an extended free trial of 30 days and a 15% discount off a monthly or 1-year subscription.
That's cloud.dealcloser.com/lawyerlife. Check it out today. Welcome to the Lawyer Life Podcast, where we seek to navigate our days with a little less stress and ideally a lot more fulfillment. In this season 6, we focus on resetting our lawyer brains. On today's episode, we discuss toughing it out. We ask whether true toughness means pushing through a hard situation or leaving it entirely. I'm Mike Anderson.
And I'm Darlene Tonelli.
Hi, Darlene.
Hello, happy Friday.
Happy. What's going on?
Oh, it's a good day. I'm excited for the summer.
Yep.
I guess that's the one thing. I'm glad that the weather's nice. I'm glad that the weeks are, I don't know. A week with good weather is just a different week than the snowy weeks. I know we talk about weather and yards a lot on the podcast, but they really do affect one's well-being, don't you think?
Yeah, and there's a bit of a metaphor here, I think, but a bunch of sunny, nice weather days in a row makes you appreciate that like rainy evening that you get that comes through. And you're like, okay, this is nice too. So anyway, balance.
Well, I love the rain because I have grass seed going on right now.
Oh no,
so
you're
every
going to
time
become
it
the
rains,
obsessive one.
I know, it's my turn.
Yeah.
You've got yours in order now, which I will be sharing on the socials this weekend. But yes, I'm trying to follow in your footsteps.
Yeah. Speaking of following in footsteps, we want to say thank you to folks who have subscribed and especially reviewed the podcast. We're so grateful for that. And if you, the listener, want to follow in the footsteps of said individuals, please do. We would really appreciate subscribe, review. It helps the podcast. It helps us reach more people. And because we feel like this is helpful content, or hopefully that's our, at least we're aiming for this to be helpful content for lawyers all over the place. And so the more folks we reach, hopefully the more good will come from the effort.
Yeah. And I also really love hearing from people when the pod has helped them through a tough time. That is just the best and keeps us going.
Yeah.
So we get that feedback. And it helps shape what we talk about in the future. It helps us understand what's resonating with listeners. So yeah, all feedback is very, very helpful to this enterprise here that we're engaged in.
The LLP enterprise. Okay, that's nice. So today, I don't know why I said that. Today we're talking about toughness, toughing it out. And, again, this season is we're focusing on that Malcolm Gladwellian sort of pivot on oftentimes the things that we think are true or the language we use to speak about things is often inaccurate. And in many cases, in fact, the opposite is true. And so today we're talking about toughness and asking whether, in truth, the tough ones in the professions, in this profession, are the individuals that, push through hard situations, or maybe what we're actually considering today is true toughness also sometimes just leaving a bad situation because that's just the right thing for you. So, Darlene, initial thoughts on toughing it out.
The way to start is to say or talk through between the two of us, what do we mean in law when we're saying toughing it out? And to me, I think it means really just putting up with what is handed to you You know, there are toxic people. Most people acknowledge that management is not well done within law, or not something we're trained to do, to be people managers. I think it has to do with kind of putting the client above everything, and in, real sacrificial lamb, masochistic, right? These are things that we say in law. And whenever I hear that, I kind of think, why is that a good thing to hack it? Well, I don't think we came through law school into the legal profession to hack it and tough it out, right? What I would like to really explore is, okay, what's the good way of toughing it out? And what is the, or is there a bad way? I guess I shouldn't answer the question because we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. Part of practicing, doing anything that, is challenging comes with, that struggle element, that thing that, you have to develop the muscle to be able to push through, whether it is just, a concept that you're struggling with learning, an agreement you're struggling to interpret or draft, a difficult case, those sort of things. There's just things inherent in the work that are hard. And I think that, the interesting thing to look at when it comes to toughing it out, and whether individuals are successful because they stay and push through, or whether individuals are not successful because they realize that it's no longer worth putting effort in, is looking at the context, and actually whether the obstacle will be a perpetual one that will always make your life worse, that gives you no joy, satisfaction, positive output. Or are you pursuing something that's difficult but will lead toward fulfillment and other positive things that you want in your life?
That's right. I would just add to the first part that if you're really toiling away, and that's how you feel, I always think toil for the sake of toil, I don't understand. For me, that's my own thing. Like, toil in pursuit of something important or great or something I value, perfect. Has to be done. But toiling, like if you feel like you're toiling and you also kind of have this idea that you're not working on the right stuff, or you're not working on something that means anything to you, or the only reward, which I do hear a lot, I wouldn't have this job if it weren't for the money. I hear that a lot. And I just think, well, how rewarding is that? And what does it cost you to have the money? So if you're toiling and only receiving money and not fulfilled, I think that's what you were describing in that first point.
Yeah, those are the sort of situations where we think that a great show of strength is actually to pivot away from the thing that's causing you that toiling feeling, or the perpetual struggle without hope feeling. So you have two options. You can stay in the struggle, and that there is strength that you need to exhibit there, and toughness. But really, the tougher thing to do is to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I will figure out the way. It won't be easy, but I'm going to spend my efforts and energy in pursuit of the thing I really want, and the thing that I think will lead to long-term fulfillment. I mean, for me, actually, on this point, this kind of rings true for me for the whole reason I went to law school. I was in a job that I, on its face, really enjoyed, but eventually it just started to become the same thing every day. I wasn't super sure of what the future would be. I didn't see myself in that career for a long time, and so a lot of the sheen was kind of off of it. And it scared me a lot. I was 20, I think when I went to law school, I was like 25, 26, which at the time I thought was super old. Looking back, it's not. Right. But to make the decision to kind of uproot my life and move to a different city to go back to school was hard. But I think that looking back at myself, to be, kind to myself, I think it was actually a great show of strength, and one I'm so grateful for now. I'm so grateful that I decided to do that and put in the effort into that more positive pursuit, instead of staying where I was and just accepting that life was going to be a slog, and that would have been that.
I think at the firms, there's definitely a culture that says if you leave, it's because you couldn't hack it. And when I left, I really felt, similar to what you described, I really felt that I wouldn't thrive there. I mean, no matter what, like even if I stayed forever, I wouldn't, I wouldn't have my life that I wanted to have. And maybe the people who stay don't feel that way, and that's fine. But I also think that there are a lot of people who stay and do feel that they don't thrive there, but stay. I think when I think about that situation, I think about people who are really other focused, like really focused on what other people are telling them to do, what other people need, what other people's personality quirks are that they have to cater to. And they're not taking ownership of their own needs in any way. And I think most, like the legal profession really supports that outlook. And I think it's deeply problematic because one, it enables behavior that should be put into check and would be in another office environment. And it also isn't very empowering as a human. You know, when you're sitting there getting kind of kicked around and someone is, and, you know, bullying behavior is rampant in our profession. And we're going to do an episode where we talk about that in a bit. But it really is a disempowered form of sitting there cranking it out. That is different than other forms of just hard work towards a purpose.
You know, we've all been in situations where we've had hard stretches of work, a week, a month, a year, where, you know, you had to be heads down and really, you know, pushing toward an end result. That is a thing. But the question is, are you doing that consistently with absolutely no joy, feeling, you know, pride? And is it just doing it for the sake of doing it so that you get the paycheck at the end of the day? It really is the only outcome that effectively matters at that point. And, you know, the question is, how much does that paycheck matter? And really, are we being compensated so well, perhaps because we're just in a situation that others would walk away from?
Right. I think so. And I just think that's so sad because it is something we joke about, you know, golden handcuffs, like sell your soul, this kind of stuff. It's, I think, real in that you can get to the end of your working life and think, well, you know, I'm comfortably provided for in my retirement and I was able to materially do the things that I needed to do. But like, who was that person doing that job all those years? So I think I always look at high material compensation and think at what cost, you know, is it worth it for what you had to give up? And this is again why I think it's so important to really distinguish like being a cog in the wheel, toiling away versus working hard in pursuit of fulfillment and personal growth, which is the second piece of this.
I mean, I would assume, you know, bucket number 2 is where you likely see your work life now, right? You know, it's a lot of work. The work is challenging, but it is, you know, in furtherance of a association that you have crafted and a way of practicing that you believe in. So has your perception of hard work changed in this new sort of model?
Well, no. I mean, I've always been, and this is sort of a misperception that actually this is a good opportunity to clarify. A lot of people think, oh, a work-life balance firm, so like you don't work very much, or, you know, you're more focused on like treat yourself and spend time at the spa. I mean, I've always worked really hard. That's always been a thing in my life, but not to the exclusion of other things. I've never been the person who would just crank it out for weeks and months on end because I don't believe in that. You know, at a certain point, it's just not who I am because I've got always just a compass of where I've got to calibrate. It's important for personal growth, hard work. I'm all over it. Hard work where it's just someone kind of, I'm caught in some strange cycle of, you know, person reviewing the draft 30 times on a power trip. Like I have no time for that. Like zero. That's a different type. You can be a very hard worker, but just make choices about what kind of work you're going to do. And to me, the metric is always, am I going to grow from this? Am I empowering myself through this work, or am I disempowering myself? And if it's the latter, I'm probably going to find a way to either fix the thing about me that's allowing that to happen through like self-improvement work, or be like, yeah, that's not a thing that needs to be in my life. So now the work that I do, I'm always just trying to grow every day. And I still do something out of my comfort zone at least once a day. I never feel like a cog. Anyone that I'm in contact with, I don't ever want them to be a cog in a wheel. I want us to be part of something exciting. So yeah, does that answer your question? That was a long answer.
Yeah, for sure.
I actually hadn't thought of that before. And as you know, sometimes I think by talking, and yeah, that about sums it up.
I think that there's a great parallel between the bad type of toughing it out and inefficiency. When you talk about like, being a junior with a senior that looks over your shoulder too much or gives you, vague directions on purpose, or this other, like, whether it's intentional or not, very common sort of behavior that comes from senior lawyers for whatever reason. I'm not going to put ill intent there, but it can be very hard to be a junior lawyer. That difficulty could come from bullying. And that's going to make you worse at your job. Like it just inevitably will. A bully will, no matter what people think, you have to toughen people up. They have to learn the ropes just like I did, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, if you just are like civil and nice and give someone clear direction and support them with intentional mentoring, they are going to be way better. Like they will be way, way better than someone who feels bad about themselves, who's questioning everything they do. All that sort of stuff is negative and terrible and can lead people, sometimes rightly, to be like, I don't need this, right? So when we're looking at, for senior folks, when you're like running your firm or treating your juniors, this isn't just like, let's see who can hack it. And that's the marker of them being good. No, actually, the marker of them being good is entirely different. And sometimes the marker of them being good is them actually leaving because you've made a terrible situation for them to exist in.
One, you make a really good point, because what you've built is someone who can hack it. That's what you built.
Yeah, not someone who's thriving. For. Yeah.
Yeah, but also, is that person the best lawyer? Is that person the most intelligent with clients? Are they the most strategic? All my strategy and, ability to solve problems is from my time to myself, where I'm like, that's the solution. It kind of pops up. It's not from grinding it. I almost never come up with innovative, interesting solutions while I'm grinding. It's like that happens and I'm like, okay, bye for the moment.
Jerry Seinfeld, comedian that we all know, I think. And he talks often about his meditation. He talks about basically like he'll be working and he'll hit that wall and he compares it to a car. He's like, you need to fill up the tank. Like it's or you can just run your brain to empty, and then what are you going to do for the rest of the day? Right. So there's a great investment in sometimes not toughing it out. And that's in a smaller example. I know we're talking more broad in this episode about, career and life in a lot of cases, but there are instances where we have to look at what's in front of us and make a decision to plow through or to take a step back, I suppose is what I'm saying. And the profession always says, or often says, the person that plows through, that's success, that's the goal, that's what we should all be. But what we're advocating for today is like the step back is at least as important of an approach to consider in a lot of situations. I'm becoming a big step back guy, is I guess what I'm saying. A big step back guy in many reasons.
Good.
So, but wait, we now need to bring in one of our, I don't know if it's like favorite or I feel like you and I connect a lot on the Stoic stuff from Ryan Holiday. And we've mentioned his work at least one other time in the podcast. And you had some great stuff from Ryan's book, Obstacle is the Way, to go through and otherwise. Do you want to cover some of that now?
Yeah. I mean, I think Stoicism, right, is having a moment, as we have discussed on the podcast. And I think it is, wrongly perceived as this idea that you just well, I shouldn't say wrongly. There are elements to it that are, life is hard, you power through, that is sort of the common view of Stoicism. But I think what Ryan Holiday does is he takes the old Stoic philosophers' ideas, kind of repackages them for the modern time and puts a new spin on them. So we have done a podcast on one of his books, The Ego is the Enemy. He's got another book called The Obstacle is the Way. And he talks about really the way that they use the tough situations and stick through them for the purposes of growth, which is exactly what I think that's what we relate to. And I just don't think it's just about being stoic and, not feeling emotion and all these other stereotypes about it. I think it's okay. We all have hard times. We all have something that is a challenge that we have to deal with. So maybe work isn't the place that a lot of people experience their stress. I mean, if you have a sick family member or, a child with special needs or, name it, everyone's got their thing. So what he talks about or what he repackages for our consumption is really talking about getting through and building your character through the hard work and the hard experiences. So, I'll read one quote from The Obstacle is the Way. It's Marcus Aurelius. And Ryan Holiday is saying that what he meant was that the Stoic finds a way to turn every negative into a positive. In this famous line, what he's suggesting is that no matter how bad or seemingly undesirable a situation becomes, we always have the opportunity to practice virtue, use the situation as an opportunity to be our best selves. We don't control when things get hard, but we always control how we respond. We can show patience, courage, humility, resourcefulness, reason, justice, and creativity, and the things that test us make us who we are. So the Stoic, he says, grows stronger and better with every obstacle they face. So that, to me, is what this is about. So some people can face the obstacles within the law firm and triumph and develop a bunch of personal power from it and go on to great things. Excellent. In my case, I looked around and I thought, I got a lot of power and growth from realizing and being forced to define what I wanted out of life and who I was as a person and what I would tolerate and what I would not. And really, as I've said before, I just really wanted to choose the things that I worked on throughout my life without doing 10 years of working on stuff that I didn't have control over. So, and that was just a principle and moral based thing that was important to me. And what I think that he's saying through all of these resources, there are many of them if listeners are interested in Stoicism, but he's basically just saying that's the growth. And whatever you do with the growth is up to you. You could stay, you can go, you can build, but you have to keep moving forward. So that was the one that stuck out to me on this topic.
In the end, though, we can only be that very intentional and present and calculated person if a lot of the other stars align with the way that we're treating ourselves and the way that our environments allow for. So I think that the other thing that comes from this on this point is that oftentimes the chips are stacked against folks in bad situations to even get to this point of I don't know if it's enlightenment, but certainly self-awareness or learning. Oftentimes cultures move so fast, have a certain way of conduct, discussion, problem solving, all that sort of thing that doesn't necessarily allow, especially a new lawyer or a lawyer that feels like they're on the outs within that culture from the outset. It doesn't allow them to self-reflect and stop and consider what's going on and build their response and control that response accordingly and own it. And a lot of the time you're just it's like a fast current that's just dragging you along, whether you want to go along for the ride or not. And the self-reflection and understanding what this is in the context of real life and not just life within the four walls of that office is hyper important to decide on what to do next after a situation unfolds, and whether toughing it out is continuing to be there or toughing it out is a departure and movement to something new.
And there's a good quote on that too, which I can put in the show notes, but a reference to Seneca. So the second thing, and sort of encapsulates what you just said. Just because you've begun down one path, now this is Ryan Holiday talking about Seneca. Just because you've begun down one path does not mean you're committed to it forever, especially if that path turns out to be flawed or impeded. At the same time, this is not an excuse to be flighty or incessantly non-committal. It takes courage to decide to do things differently and make a change, as well as discipline and awareness to know that the notion of, oh, but this looks even better, is a temptation that can't be endlessly indulged either. And that is, I think, the crux of like what we're talking about. It's not just like, oh, I'm not happy, I'm going to go over here and that's going to be better, because, you know, you're going to be there too. This is what I've found. If you move and you haven't made any sort of self-improvement or empowered yourself at all, you will kind of come up against the same thing again, just in a different format, maybe even more challenging the second time. So we can probably do a whole episode on that topic.
This is hard work.
That's hard work. When you get into Stoicism, the truth is that it is helpful, but also I think we have to carve out space for fun in it.
And it's the standards are so high.
The standards
they're just
are
like
so
the
high.
highest standards of conducting yourself. I love it. I'm reading it currently. It is very, man, a paragraph is enough to think about for 5 days. Like, it is just, there's so
dense.
much. And I have to remind
business.
myself that we're not aiming for perfection, Mike. We're just trying to self-improve, blah, blah, blah.
That reminds me of something I've come to lately, which is that when doing all this self-work, so for listeners of the pod that are trying to do self-improvement and going through all this stuff, it really is imperative that we take some time and put fun or relaxation into the day as well, especially during this COVID time. But this stuff is a bit heavy for sure.
Yeah. And when we were like initially formulating thoughts on toughing it out, rest was a big thought in my mind, because the only time that our minds actually taking information properly to have effective learning, or our bodies, if we are trying to strengthen ourselves, rest is imperative. Like, rest is imperative all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we are in situations that challenge us, that also calls for situations in which we can completely unwind and allow ourselves to rest. So that's like, again, in the face of the toughing it out mentality, which just like, I don't know, for me, just see this like, bulldog of a lawyer, just like constantly moving forward, pushing folks aside. Nothing gets in my way, never showing weakness like that. And in the end, that person is going to fall flat on their face. Like it is inevitable. If you're constantly sprinting, you have to stop at some point. And that's maybe one of the more serious things that part of this conversation is that, like, for some people, this can be a life and death matter, right? Like, we have major mental health issues in the profession. We have substance abuse issues in the profession. It is, I am no doctor or expert in this area. I would hazard to guess you're more likely to enter into one of those two zones if you are profoundly dissatisfied with what you're doing, and you're doing it a lot at great cost to your energy, and the other things that you could be reserving for more positive endeavors that actually support your life. So it's hyper important. We do want to say that it is fine and important, and maybe a sign of great strength and success to be a lawyer that chooses a different way, pauses, steps aside, moves to a different area, decides to make a change to get away from a really hard circumstance.
Yeah. Or if you just you tough it out, like it says in that quote, just because you started there doesn't mean you have to stay there.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think that's a big thing. And for people who are really failure averse, that can be such a hard thing to face down, where you're just like, no, I got this big job. I got to keep it. I got to do what has to be done. Maybe if it's not soul crushing, that's a good choice. But then you have to build all the good habits within that toughing it out, as opposed to just toughing it out at the exclusion of well-being.
Agreed. So thanks for that chat, Darlene. That was a good one.
I think we're processing that one together at the time. Sometimes on the Lawyer Life podcast, we're talking about stuff that I really feel like I'm through and have dealt with. And sometimes we're talking about stuff where I'm like, yeah, I'm still in an evolving state of consciousness on this point. And I think that I think this is one of those topics for sure for me.
Yeah. I think you could look at it through 5 different lenses and scales, and the analysis there would be interesting in each, and maybe we'll do that again in further episodes. But for now, we will take a pause and come back with our goods and grapes. The Lawyer Life podcast is brought to you by Inter Alia Law. Inter Alia lawyers have big firm training, in-house experience, and a wide range of expertise in technology, media, and entertainment. Our advice is business-focused, speedy, and practical. To learn more, visit interalialaw.com. That's interaliaa-law.com. And we are back with our goods and gripes. Goods are things we want to promote and support, and gripes are things that annoy us. Okay, Darlene.
Okay, goods. I would say what's good is my son is developing a real sense of humor, and it's so funny. It is so fun to have someone making jokes in the house that are of the grade 1 level. My goodness, the things that he finds funny are great. And one thing about it is that he found the show Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Oh yeah.
Which has been it's a reboot, I guess, is what we would call it. Lily,
do you want to hear my Alvin impression?
I have heard it, and you've done it on the podcast once before.
No, I'm so desperate to do it.
Like, actually,
Alvin, I have an
happened.
excuse to do my Alvin impression.
Which I have heard it, and I'm pleased that you have one. But I didn't realize it was like a new show. But he finds it just as good as I found it back in the day, and it's funny to see that something about these chipmunks is, intergenerational. So it was, I'm sure, annoying to parents then. It's kind of annoying to parents now, but he loves it. So I like seeing him happy. And right now for the kids, just anything that will make them happy and laugh and enjoy a good time as kids is fair game.
Okay.
Right
I have a gripe that's directly related to this, and I have a theory and then a gripe. First of all,
okay.
Speaking of, like, there's something magical about these chipmunks that kids love. I just think that kids will love almost anything you put in front of them on television. This is my theory, backed up by my gripe, which is, have you ever watched Blippi on YouTube? Oh, okay. So Blippi is like, he's a guy that does a YouTube show that's been immensely successful. He dresses up and goes to, like, a construction site and is like, this is a front loader. Oh, look at how great this front loader is. But it is, it's just like unscripted. It is like, there's no format. There's no learning. It's just this guy with glasses and a hat on talking about construction vehicles or like the play site he's on. And the kids in the neighborhood love it. So my son watched it and then he became obsessed with it and I hate it. It's totally my gripe. And now it makes me question at all the efforts that we put into making great children's programming, because I just wonder, based on this, maybe that they don't need much at all. So Blippi is my gripe. Also, my good is kids related, and it's small, but with the good weather comes trips to the ice cream store to get popsicles, and the joy that brings to a child's day is incredible. Mm-hmm. It is, and therefore a great mechanism to bring joy to my life, because when they're super happy and excited, then I'm super happy. So my good is just that incredible amount of joy that popsicles and ice cream can be brought. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And such a summary thing that you probably have memories of as a kid. That's kind of tied to my gripe a little bit, which is I always feel like I have to make a homemade birthday cake for my kids. I just feel like that is a thing that I have to do.
Yeah.
It's not me. Like if we talk about integrity and authenticity and all the things that I value, I make, 3 cakes a year, which is not enough cakes to be skilled at making cakes. And it's just not my thing. I like cooking, baking. I don't want to create even a culture with us that's like the most important thing about the birthday. So I don't know. I need to revisit that because it causes intense stress. And I realized that on a billable hour basis, to make the cake this year, it was like a many $1,000 cake. I'm like, this is not, I don't need to do this. This is a thing. Like we have to choose the things that we value.
I know I've done this before. I quibble with your running a billable hour analysis on your time like that, because that's a dangerous. I'd be like, well, it's not worth showering because this shower costs X amount of dollars. There's things that you need to do in your personal life that you can't run a billable against, I would say. And I think that you just tend to run your billable against the stuff that you don't like doing, which
correct.
Yeah.
100% accurate.
Yeah.
And where I've received a quote that I rejected because I thought it was too high, and then I made it myself. I'm like, well, that wasn't a very good economic decision. Anyway. Yeah, this is the thing about being kind of conscious about decisions that I'm making. It has to be something that I don't know. As the listeners will know, as you know, I don't like doing things just because it's what is done. I like to do things if it makes sense in the context that I'm in, and this one doesn't, and I do it every year. And so, revisiting. That's my gripe.
Okay. Good for you.
Good for you. Joy of ice cream, gripe of cake.
Yep.
Anyway. Okay, well, this is good discussion and good. I'm sure we'll both be thinking about this one for a bit. I will be.
I'm just going to be dreaming about it.
Dreaming about
wake up in the middle of the night. Toughen it out. It's so good. Okay. Well, until I update you on my dreams next time, we'll talk soon.
Okay, talk soon.
That's it for this week's episode of LLP. Thanks to Inter Alia Law for presenting the podcast and to Nick Fowler for composing and performing our music. See our show notes for his website. Don't forget, we love feedback. Please comment in the review section or subscribe or like. We'd appreciate it greatly. That's it. Talk soon.